in a manner that is not ordinarily chronological or geometrical. If you may have noticed, I have been driven to or moved to, have attempted to convey more information for the last some weeks than apparently we have the ordinary time for during the tapings. In that sense, if this is possible in the 3D world at least, I have fallen behind. That is, I have started trying to sketch out certain little pictures, bring little updates, and I have yet for the last some weeks ever covered all of that even I intended to as I stood here. And inasmuch as three-dimensional wise, I am getting further behind. Either that or you are, or closer to moving to... I have undertaken a slightly new project. I sat down and beyond such things as Kyroots comments, I have started, I guess, a little kind of notebook. And I was going to have somebody read these tonight before I start my comments. And of course, they will speak for themselves, whatever you hear from this. But it is somewhat on the basis of me picking up for the last some weeks, tying together some things, some bridges verbally between things that I said and did not say, between things that I said and intended to finally say, and did not that night because, thanks to the great progress in the city, they can't make tape any longer than whatever the hell this is, an hour and a half. So if that's the way that the city is going to deal with this, we're stuck with it. Even after these are read tonight, this starts back just some weeks ago, whether you can identify it or not. And I sat this afternoon and tried to, my original intention was to run it sort of up to date, if not into the future, based upon non-speculation as to what I might be discussing next week. I got 4 pages and we're still way behind, but we're going to see how this operates tonight. This does not mean that I have sent Kyroot to the same fate as Santa Claus suffered, as some of you know, on the Jersey Turnpike several years back. But this is a slightly different aspect, and see if you can find any bridge points between what I have been talking about and into other areas. Worth, how about read these?
The 3 possibilities one might verbally note. Look what I'm saying, look what I'm doing, and look what I am. If the gods did create man with a free will, then as per the second law of thermodynamics, which indicates that the natural state of everything is chaos, and that everything will run down to become even more disorganized, then through such a creation, they would have set in motion actions that would ultimately lead to greater disarray and irregularity in their own universe. Under fairly routine pressure, D will, in a conciliatory tone, mumble on about reform, while C knows only outright upheaval will do. The revolutionist must treat popular public opinion with the same attitude he might have towards Cinderella or leprechauns with clipboards. While physicists try and peer into the material fabric of all things, and psychologists attempt to predict the nature of people, the revolutionist is striving to personally plot the 4-dimensional topography of all things, including man, the material. Shopping and collecting can be seen as either leftovers of some past molecular need or as civilized trophies of man's continual submission to force, as if the 3D mind could imagine an alternative. The revolutionist knows that in battles, the victor is never seriously questioned in regard to his original motives, In the inner state, who could lead such an inquiry? If a top 40 station won't play it, it's over 3 minutes long, and it's too long. This goes for records and ideas. Any philosophical or religious system that cannot be pointedly described is suspect. A corollary of the above is that any revolutionary goal should be describable in 3 words. The revolutionist knows that just as the belly lacks real ambrosia, the mind too receives food as information that is always lacking in some nutrient. Imperfect data, always missing the next upcoming piece. In 3D affairs, it seems as though one can either deal in details or work on grand scales. At one fell swoop, all infidels would instantly become pious if they suddenly saw time as a full-fledged, full-time partner in mortal topography. If they but knew how to use it, time would be any religion's greatest weapon. Is there any real 3D difference between actually achieving some particular condition and in simply making others believe that you have? The circuits in a man must be constantly fed and kept active, or else like a fire they will cool and become lifeless. If it were ordinarily as much fun to fondle and stimulate your brain as it is your sexual parts, even carpenters would be philosophers, and Playboy would really have articles good enough to read. Has no one yet to note, the people sing of their love and loyalty to their liege, the weak for the strong, as though their allegiance were for the benefit of the king, rather than the other way around. For the revolutionist, all fears are small road signs announcing, work not completed, temporarily abandoned. Without a certain non-abrasive wit, what man has reliable judgment regarding the 3D world? How would you have your life judged? From up close or from a distance? Which would you imagine is easiest and could be carried on for the greater length of time? The blue circuit pretending to be yellow, or vice versa? It is natural to believe that one could become more famous in Paris than would ever be possible here at home, or even in the next county. When the people are properly inflamed to the mob level, the improbable ceases to be a problem. Ordinary men have treated the woman question either as seeing them as a puzzle to be solved, or else playing with the pieces for a bit, then tossing them in the corner. In the city, people learn nothing from compliments, at least no more than from complaints. Man's overall belief that his ills and misfortunes come from his own thoughts and deeds is a reflection of life working through human consciousness, accepting its responsibility for its many experiments and fits and starts. The whole arrangement is quite useful and harmless to man, but is one from which the revolutionist must steadfastly struggle to escape. The only recruit truly free from superstition would be he who has replaced all his notions and names of deities with the one single term: bad fucking luck. The ruling powers are firmly in control when they have made the people generally accept that nothing exists beyond the boundaries of the city, or at least nothing of any potential personal consequence. One who can eternally remember that from some view everything is true cannot be deceived. The revolutionist should treat his people, that is, himself, with a sense of bemused superiority, a feeling that you've got to be better than yourself. A real revolutionary artist does not make mistakes. He simply binds them up in cheaper frames for the flea market. Privileged revolutionary information may not appear to cure all the ills of city life, but it will leave the few all but immune to the many little nagging ills between the grave and grave stupidity. As soon as the recruits can bear it, the revolutionists should post a warning that reads, "Anyone saying the words God, good, or evil will be summarily shot. Primitive stupidity is a capital offense in the bushes." Any truth that is not ad hoc is no truth. Possessions all too easily become dreams men put on to play doctor in their weary maturity. The real revolution is not to destroy and conquer, but to quicken and release. It is not to celebrate the murders of victory, but to revel in the triumph of new birth. You should not pass even a fallen moth with no thought or regard, taking its demise as either a non-event or else an all too common one to note. For you can never truly know whether it is hard for a butterfly to die, as you well imagine it will be for you. All games are energy transactions between the pushers and the pushees, with the undersided becoming referees and umpires. At times, the best way to deliver new, coded data is in a manner apparently straightforward and obvious. The ordinary speaking of love is like an attempt to freeze the breeze. It is the effort to cause passing passion to become steady and constant by talking about love, which is always an after-the-fact reference. The revolutionist knows to still shun the ruling powers, even when they throw parties for the people and send him a birthday card.
Back in business? I caught a typo. It was supposed to go like this. If a top 40 station won't play it, it's over 3 minutes long, and it's too long. This goes for records and ideas. Any philosophical or religious system that cannot be pointedly described in 3 minutes is suspect. Yet another description about what this might be about that I can say with all certainty as I attempt to flesh it in for you. that above all things, a would-be revolutionist, a revolutionist has got to strive for efficiency. In the area of efficiency, much of it would be invisible. That would be his own internal efficiency. But some of it would not be. Some of it would be quite mundane. As I want to note from time to time, if I were going to start out and apparently put together some codified system to present this as being this or that, I could call this the efficiency system. And of course, as you would suspect, I would encourage the people or state to would-be followers and devotees of it that efficiency covers a multitude of areas and times that ordinary consciousness has not previously perceived, has not previously connected to the matter of efficiency. Some of the areas that I was going to try and point toward, as I said, are invisible and seem to be of a perhaps more intellectual, philosophical, God forbid, religious nature, whereas some that I am going to point out are not. But they are all important. And one of the, how shall we put it? Yeah, difficulties. That's one word. If the kid likes the word, I like it. Is trying to get, and I'm going to say you people to include a multitude of sins. You people, individually and or, God forbid, the second time collectively, to see any potential significance to attempting to be efficient in what would appear to be quite mundane everyday affairs. There is a way in which I can correctly point out to you that what has been the so-called mystical states, super states of consciousness, all kinds of states of heightened awareness, whatever they may be called, I could point out to you that they are indeed a kind of, or just simply a condition of enhanced simplicity. I could say, to take some of the better-known historical fiction examples, that Buddha was Indianly super efficient, or that Moses was extremely Jewishly efficient. And that's it. A revolutionist would be extremely efficient in whatever he or she did. This does not mean that there is no possibility for one being, while in the midst of being efficient, to step in a hole and turn one's ankle. After all, life does it. So I cannot hold up any promise, nor a threat, nor to in some way try and induce lateral guilt in you that someone attempting to do this never drops the what? Ball. Never accidentally sticks up, oh my God, in his finger. But here's where we leave the area again of what would appear to be an absolute reflection of one thing in the 3D world that's something else when you get into the bushes. Ordinary people can feel guilty. People can feel guilty and spend time with apparently a trained psychologist, analyst, and in a sense point out to the analyst and themselves that I am inefficient. I am fat and I am ugly and I do not need a second opinion. I am no good. And it is all an admission that I am inefficient. A kind of revolutionary efficiency is that you have to make the absolute greatest possible use of all resources and all energy. That is all you have got. And of course, if we're going to drag our friend Sam Einstein into the 4D world, you can always remember that energy and resources seem to be inner what? Not interstate highways, no. And interchangeable. Back in the city, and of course we have to put this as always in an ad hoc position in quotation marks, back in the city, there is much waste in quotation marks. Not through stupidity, not through a flaw in life's own evolution. That is not certainly any manifestation that everything's coming apart and we're going to blow the planet up and burn up the ozone and etc. But from a revolutionary viewpoint of extreme efficiency, one of the descriptions of the city, your city, everyone's city, is you could, through the great means of graffiti, properly rename every city to go up their city limits and spray paint out their name and simply put in Wasteville. There is a continual, quotation marks, waste of energy and resources, but this is a byproduct, that is the waste, is a byproduct of three-dimensional change. It is a byproduct of orderly change. It is a byproduct of gradual change. There is no way in which you can take the ordinary workings of the city, that you can take the workings of General Motors, the bureaucracy of the government, the inner workings of the Vatican, the inner workings of you at the ordinary level, and make them more efficient. This is nothing new. It is not Senator Proxmire coming up with the ideas and attacks on government and bureaucracies as being inefficient. You just haven't read your Greek enough. You hadn't looked back in your own nervous system and find your own Greek writers, the echoes of it. They have been laughing, criticizing, that is, certain parts of life's body, other parts of life's body, especially what seems to be the institutions, the handmaidens of the ruling powers within your state and the other states, of continually crying out that things are not efficient, that they're wasting resources, they're wasting people's energy, but things are operating as efficiently as they can. But compared to what I am trying to point towards tonight, the city, indeed, the rallying cry, or the banner that could be placed upon the operations of the city is wasteful, 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 wasteful. But you've got to remember, from the 3D view, they are not. Everything is running a tempo, on schedule. When the trains are late, they're on schedule. When the government spends $2 million doing a survey of how to allocate funds out for a new program that's going to only expend revenues of $500,000, you've got to be way down on the food chain. You've got to be falling around the hippos, theoretically and intellectually, to holler out, waste, waste, waste. You just don't understand. It's a good thing that we got you at least temporarily out of the city, because you'll never make it there. Oh, you might make it. You might become a damn social critic. You might run for public office. Get dumb enough, far enough down the food chain, you might win a place at the public trough, at the public forum. So remember, we're jumping back and forth as always, that from a viewpoint, a privileged viewpoint out in the bushes, from a viewpoint of time being a constant partner, even in the 3D world, what appears to be waste from that viewpoint is not waste. The government, religions, your family, the business for which you work, they are all operating at the necessary level of efficiency. If in some way someone could artificially, unnaturally, become involved with the operations of any such organization and could apparently infuse it with new energy that could radically and very quickly apparently make it more efficient, it would explode. It would come apart. You would be putting the fuel they use in dragsters into your 2 cubic inch lawnmower. And I would dare say that you've got no business trying to crank that son of a bitch. Things are operating as efficiently, just right at the level that keeps things in the city stable, orderly, predictable, and it also gives the sensation outside a common full-time awareness of time. It continues to give the sensation that there is a continuity to everything, that there seems to be gradual improvement. But you cannot have drastic improvement, because that would bring about drastic efficiency, which would break that institution up. It would break the city up. It would break the government up. It would break Xerox up. It would break your family up. If you were not prepared for it, if I in some way could make you suddenly be acutely aware of efficiency, and you had some perception of what I mean by it by the time we get through here, and I could suddenly make you just instantly desire to be that efficient, to even try it, it would tear up your state. We're talking artificial. This cannot happen. It's an acme. But if I could do it, it would do you harm. You have got to have some understanding of it, and you have got to do it to yourself. And when I let the kid put the word in my mouth about disappointed, I have had less, God, have I had less than flaming success with any of you, no matter how interested you have seemed to be for this, no matter how hungry you have seemed to be for it, for me to find anywhere yet, for me to get my finger down into your wiring system, to find any of you that seem to have either a native ability or the native ability to let me or someone interfere, for you to see that there is something to be gained from efficiency. Not the efficiency just of being here on time, not just the efficiency if I say, go do so-and-so, by God, you've got to do it to stay here in this activity, and you go do it. No, I'm talking about real teeny-weeny, little bitty things. Now, how's this for teeny-weeny? I could judge. I can go back in the city. I could hang around out where some of the recruits are camped, out in the bushes even. But I can go up to garbage bags, laying out ready to be picked up. And assuming that they're thin enough, which they all seem to be, that you can get a general idea of what's inside. To look in there and find little boxes of TV dinners, boxes of soap powder, little boxes of anything, that are still more or less in their natural condition, that is, as they came from the store. Now, those of you who are unfortunate enough to have missed working in a storeroom or somewhere equally exotic in your younger days, there is a process known as breaking down boxes. If nothing else, if you had a little soap box, a breaking down of a box in your kitchen would be to mash that son of a bitch flat, maybe tear it up in 2 or 3 ways, to where the box itself, now you start out with an empty box, it is now a small stack of torn up sheets of cardboard, that the emptiness that was in the box has now gone out of the box and is back in the universe. And the emptiness is not in the garbage bag. You released the resources of the emptiness in the box. But almost all ordinary people in the world take the empty box when they're through, like all of you do, and you throw it in the garbage. Therefore, when you get ready to take out that garbage bag, about half of it is empty, and half of it is unliberated emptiness. Half of it is unliberated resource. Half of it is unliberated energy. A revolutionary garbage bag, or a garbage bag from some source where I to see it would impress me enough to stop and ask for a biscuit or something, or to find out who lived there, would be a bag that you could look at and there is almost no emptiness in the bag. It's all garbage. To within the physical limits of that bag, the person had stuffed and covered and taken up every available space. Now let us imagine that we're not simply talking about garbage, we're talking about something else. Although I want you to understand, I'm talking about fucking garbage. Now it's not just an allegory. But the real revolutionists would also cram as much into every available space as possible. If he does not, he is not efficient. If he does not, he's just part of the neighborhood. He is the common man all over. Go look at your own garbage bags, or those of you who still want to take things personally. First, look at someone else's garbage bag. And it may be swollen up like this. You can pick it up with 2 fingers because it's mostly unliberated space in there. It is an inefficient way to pack up garbage. It is an inefficient way to use resources. If you're not going to fill up every available space with whatever it is that has got to go somewhere, you're attempting to fuel a revolution with very questionable energy. Slightly skewed approach to efficiency is, from certain views, a revolutionary existence far beyond mere garbage bags, or far less, according to where you fall in the food chain. As you could say that a revolutionary existence or a revolutionist, from one view, would kind of be, in a certain way, single-minded. Although it would transverse any stable time in any particular constant area, that is, at certain times and certain places. The revolutionists could appear to be, I hate to fall into technical terminology, but you should be used to it by now. It could appear to be either loose as a goose or tight as a tick. That there could apparently be a single-mindedness in some area at some time, and in some other area at some time, even the same one, apparently, if you believe that something can be the same thing at a different time, and I know some of you still do. That at times it could appear to be a single-minded, almost an idea fixe, if you were looking at it with regular binary consciousness on the part of the revolutionist, and another time, apparently in the same kind of circumstance, he might appear to be the living example of insouciance. There would be a kind of single-mindedness, I could say, across the verbal board, if you can jump at least to 3.5D consciousness. But a kind of continuing single-mindedness would be a revolutionary addiction to habits that were meaningless. They've got to be meaningless to you. If they're meaningful, that means you were born with them. That means they are relevant. That means they are M-E-D-R-E, I believe. That means they are useless. That means that they are prune whip. In the city, some more updates. I may not say anything else, but I'd like to remind you from last week, in the city, remember, they play everyone's song. But I've got something else to tell you. In the city, they have heard it all before. Really. They've heard it all before. I would have to update the story, but some of you might remember them. A long time ago, first time I wrote anything publicly, I stuck in Magnus Machina, a little story of good forces and bad forces, gods and anti-gods, getting in a gamble. You could look at it as being C and D. You could look at it as being addicted to city life, as opposed to the desire to become a revolutionist. And these two forces, these two possibilities, fall into some sort of game of chance. And to make it interesting, they gamble, or they use as markers the fortunes of souls yet unborn. And as the bad guy began to get ahead, he realized that he had better things to do than to keep up with all this. And so he sent one of his minions out and into the womb, into the genetic code of mankind, down particular lines along which he was winning the souls, the futures, the attention of these yet unborn humans on this level. One of his minions simply slipped into the DNA code and told them everything. Everything. So that later, if there was any chance of a revolution brewing in their city and someone began to talk in a way that even skated on the edge of significance, everybody could say quite truthfully what? I've heard all that before. They have heard it all before in the city. All of it. There's a prime example besides my story, since you people have been putting on these public programs and writing these reviews and plays. I saw a review not too long ago of one of the plays written in a college paper, so we'll assume a college-age student, and it was about one of the plays wherein there was the core of the verbal part of the play was this super substance, this drug that a man had invented, and that everyone who ingested it saw, accepted everything that happened in a fresh light, that it made everything stay fresh and new, all of human experience. And the part that jumped out that I recall now is this reviewer, after rambling on about lights and music and this and that, made some comment about a kind of sophomoric writing wherein this super substance, this secret drug that continued to make everything fresh and new for those who took it in the play, that the author, words to this effect, seemed to almost every scene bring it back up. The direct inference being from this reviewer, this college-age student, that this kind of need for things to stay fresh and new is like an idea that we all know that. And plus, we all think about it all the time. And somebody hears somebody trying to just rub it in, like, get on to something, bypass the obvious. Now, surely all of you read that same review. There is yet another example, a living example that I didn't have to make up, is in the city. They've heard it all before. Now, I continue of late and periodically to point out, through questions, through suggestions, and etc., about the new nature. And I've even tried to get you to consider things that were beyond the apparent literal purpose of me saying that you should personally consider the unusual nature of some of what I've told you. And then try and juxtapose that to the fact of you not trying to do something publicly at times, as I have directed and demanded. And how much can you convey that really strikes people as new? If information is too drastic in the city, the people won't hear it. Or if they hear it, it is not taken as having any value, such as someone pop up in the city. Life does this to itself time and again. That somebody in some neighborhood pops up and they're famous for at least 15 minutes. And they say, I have been given this crystal by little people from Mars, and anyone who holds it against their breast while repeating the name of this little person, something miraculous will happen. It will cure gout, and if you don't have it, it'll give it to you. As long as it's too drastic, nobody will hear it, or else it will be discounted. Then you've got to start moving across this three-dimensional spectrum, and you start getting to the place of, well, that's not too drastic. I thought maybe you people coming out of the bushes there, I keep hearing about you, and I thought when you people came in that you'd be madmen and women. But what you're saying, you're kind of being sophomoric and kind of dragging it out and keep repeating it, but, you know, sure, we all know that here in the city because we've heard it all before. Living in the city is to have heard it all before. The people. And now, is the kid and you might suspect, we're surely talking about something other than the relationship between those born in Bayonne and those now living full-time in Manhattan. We're talking about something else. But the people in you, have they not heard it all before? What is the possible use? Why does life tell certain people certain things, tell them over and over in different ways? Why do I repeat? Why are we meeting as often as we meet? Apparently constantly changing the basis of the maps, the descriptions, the terminology, me talking for a period of time over man, the nervous system. And for a long period of time, or a considerable length of time, the forces, and how man can be seen as a representation of a triaxial dance. And now, me speaking of revolutionary activities, and the state, and the people. It is extremely difficult, even those who were born to do this, to give you a short thumbnail entree, theoretically, even those born to do it, you're still outnumbered. The people in you, everybody in the city has heard it all before. The city is not a bunch of yokels and rubes. And you do not walk into your city, you do not go back in the city and say, hey, I have got some astounding info, and give them that which is astounding to your revolutionary spirit, and them to go, wow, I too am astounded. Now they go at very best. The people will go, well, yeah, that's a good idea, but, you know, Jesus, you don't have to bring it up in every act. We all know that. All of us 23-year-old college students, I mean, you know, we know all that. The staging wasn't bad, some of the music wasn't bad, but Jesus, don't take the obvious and just beat us over the head, you know, onto something else, onto something of a greater depth. Let me point out something about new data. For it to be, in the revolutionary sense, really new and fresh data, it has got to meet three criteria. Three criteria regarding what ordinary people, I guess, would call the, what's the word? True. Actually existing, that kind of stuff. That the three criteria for real new revolutionary information has got to be that it never was, it is not now, and it can never be. If the new information will fit within any of those three possibilities, then that would mean that the information is now true and stable and it's of no value. As clever as that may have tickled some people's ears, it is a fact. It's a three-dimensional fact. It's not revolutionary, it's not new, it is not useful if from that 3D view of the city, the information ever was, could now be, or now is, or could ever be. Now on an individual basis, if it suddenly strikes you, hey, that is true. That's what happened back in the time of Buddha. And whatever it was, whatever that you were thinking, whatever it was, let's say that you apparently were getting from me, and suddenly it struck you, wait a minute. It's like a flashback of things I used to read and dream about that they were doing in Tibet 500 years before the new calendar if it seems as though this in some way has proven or has created a connection in you that now you're sure, hey, that is what happened, you just blew it. The information is of no value. If it seems to have any validity, if it seems to have the ability to prove the past, validate the present, or to safely predict what's coming up, you got nothing. You may have had, without knowing it, Gene Dixon move into your underwear, but you got nothing. If it can be true now that, this information is not just in some way theoretical, it's not just intriguing verbally, that's a fact, Jack. It has now become stable. It's now become constant as far as you're concerned right then. The people have adopted it. Enough people have adopted it, it has now become a truism in the city. It has become a fact. Or if you believe, well, I can predict the future. I'm not a complete dummy, and here I am. I have reached over 40 summers, and I find out that based upon the rising of the sun, I can safely predict that tomorrow the sun will rise. You're getting cocky. Only the people would do that. A revolutionist might know. He might know for a fact that the sun is coming up tomorrow, but he sure as hell does not go around telling anybody, much less himself. He knows it'd only be people. He knows it'd only be people in him with imperfect information who would say, listen, the sun's going to come up tomorrow based upon yesterday, based upon what's 40 times 365, 12,000 yesterdays. He wouldn't believe that for a New York minute. Because if he did, it would have no validity. Any information that he may have had, that he may have been dealing with, that seemed to have culminated in this kind of thought, this kind of attitude, this kind of view, has now become stable, it's become lifeless. In a quite real sense, a would-be revolutionist faces the real duty as though it were brand new each and every day. And if he does not truly update this kind of secret map that he's working by, then every 24 hours he gets another day behind. And all that takes is to get up, and either anybody who has to can start doing it verbally, but you got to immediately forget it. But you have got to up-to-date the map every day, or what you understood is now 24 hours behind, literally. You have fallen behind. You have got to anew every day ask yourself, just what is this all about? What is the purpose of this? What is my purpose in this? Now, to jump back into what may appear to be in the beginning, an external observation, let me say the real revolutionist understands very quickly that you cannot carry along. That's right, kid, I said carry. I heard somebody read the Bible once. Tarry. You cannot tarry long on newly won ground. You cannot do it. You can't do it out there, which is of very little consequence perhaps. You cannot do it in here. The real revolutionists, with a kind of bemused superiority that I'm not sure came out in the way in which I wrote down the notebook piece that was read earlier, the kind of bemused superiority that I intended to convey would be like the revolutionist looking at himself and actually feeling superior on the basis that, look at what I am naturally, there ain't no doubt I've got to be better than that. That was the intent. It's not that I've got to be, that's required of me. It's not that. It's just naturally. To look at me, I have got to be better than that. In other words, there's somebody in the world I'm better than. No matter where I am on the food and evolutionary scale, there's one person, there's always at least one person that I'm better than. Yeah. What I was getting at in general is once you have apparently won some new land, once you understand something new, if you stop there, you are at the very least getting 24 hours behind. Because if you stop there, you will not ask yourself anew every day, what is the purpose? You will be there, and the people will be congratulating one another. Some of the people will be saying, well, thank God none of us, or very few of us, got harmed in that little skirmish. They'll be doing something, but they will not be redefining the map. It'll be like, whew, well, let's take off a few days or a few minutes and enjoy the fruits of our conquest. It's almost impossible, I grant you that. I don't know why I keep granting you stuff. I know that everybody wants to, and I know it seems all right. But every day that you do that, you fall 24 hours behind. That's the very least. The worst stage of this situation is that when you tarry too long in one place, you begin to grow into it, you begin to rot, you begin to die in the soil of that one spot. Anything that you know stinks. You have got what amounts to less than, in human terminology and for dogs, you've got less than a split second to see it, to understand it, to have gained some new ground. You've got like that. After that, it begins to rot. It begins to smell faster than fish and visiting relatives. It doesn't take a few days for them to begin to smell. It's like that. If you're going to stop, and even within your own city, you and the people go, wow, are we having fun now or what? Am I becoming mystical or what? I never thought that I would be able to be in a situation like this and survive, but I feel good. Without even James Brown's band in the background, I feel good. This is a miracle. God, this is great. I'm so happy I got into this, I could spit. You're losing it. It seems perhaps innocuous enough, or you may think that I'm back into melody what? Maddox. Everybody cries about energy. All those that seem convinced that they were born to do this, you continue to cry. How to overcome boredom, how to overcome lethargy, how to overcome apparent lapses in my secret energy flow. If you stop and you let something become meaningful, you stop on newly won ground, then you're falling into what I mentioned to you last time we met, that if anything lasts past the initial flash, it's meaningless. That is, any great cosmic truth that you discovered, perhaps it's a minor cosmic truth or a corollary of a great cosmic truth. If you see it and it lasts past that initial flash, it's meaningless. And yet that is the very thing some of you hear what I'm saying, that's the very thing back in the city. That's the very thing that the people, all institutions, that's the very thing that they want to run up banners for, make new flags, write a new book, is now we're getting somewhere. I have discovered something new. I have discovered something that's so meaningful, I almost fell to my knees, almost blacked out. Well, that's great. But you only got about that long. You can black out, you can have a fit, you can have some kind of emotional or intellectual orgasm, but past that, forget it. Nothing is going on. It was true that long, but now it has fallen into, hey, it now is. It now falls into one of the three criteria. That is true. That's the kind of thing I believe he's been talking about. That's the kind of thing I always imagine, and suddenly I see it's true. Well, you got that long. And it's not true. It's not correct. It may be true. You can't use it, and you continue to try to use it, and you feel tired. And at the same time, you believe, well, I'm doing something. I'm operating now on the basis of having superior or new insight. No, you're not. If you got there and you won some kind of new territory, and you looked at it, what the hell do you want? You saw it. I'm going to stay here, and some way I'm going to bivouac here, set up a new camp, and I'm all right now. In the city, little contemporary history I might draw in right here. No matter that from one viewpoint, since I'm now involved with using my descriptions of revolutions and ruling powers and people, from that kind of viewpoint, we could say that that is why life produces such as this within itself, is an attempt for it to undergo a rebellion, to make, as it were, quantum leaps in its growth. And that's why people like us suddenly pop up. You know, this has a reflection out in life. And I said contemporary history. I was going to mention to you the Russian Revolution and the Chinese attitude toward their revolution. Out in life, let's take the so-called Russian Revolution, based upon, as they put it, the ideas that popped out through Marx and Engels primarily, that the proper state, the best government, the best way that the people would operate is if there were a constant revolution, an ongoing, continuing revolution. Folks, it ain't possible. You could see a certain small faux pas that life made, not in Russia, but in China. They tried that, and things almost fell apart. But notice how life works. Of course, ordinary people would say, well, this is some sort of shortcoming of humanity. But this is life. At the place where this so-called kind of revolution, this external revolution, really took hold, the greatest living manifestation, the largest number of people right now would be Russia. They continue to talk, they continue to mouth in that part of life's body, in that state of that continual revolution. Revolution, revolution, that's the way to grow. And they are probably the most conservative, status quo-minded, regressive group of people on this planet. But it's all right as long as some neighborhood, some city, some whole state cries revolution all the time. It's got to be revolution. That's the only thing that keeps us going in the forefront of things right now. They're not in the forefront. There is no ongoing revolution. They couldn't hardly be more conservative for their size. No dissent, no revolution going on. But as long as you simply talk about it, it's all right. You've got, again, the internal division of the way life talks and the way life works. But the one place in our lifetime that they apparently really tried it, I point out to you in comparison, the Chinese are these great leaps forward. Let's have a great revolution. And they kind of turned it loose. And like life thought, well, why not? We'll try it over here with these folks. After 2 or 3 weeks, they almost destroyed that whole part of their state. You got to turn the tape. There is something that they have been saying in the cities over and over and over in different ways, and everyone's heard this. It comes out of religious ideas, it comes out of so-called metaphysical schools, it comes out of, in a certain way, even just philosophical musing. I guess the best known is probably the religious context of them saying that you cannot serve man and God. Philosophically, you cannot sit between two stools. Perhaps a little more philosophically, you cannot serve two masters. All right, so you've got this all the way. You could have from a very laical neighborhood, you could have a father telling his son, hey, listen, when I ask you to go out and tend the cattle, farm the fields, don't go out there and take that damn electric guitar and spend your time doing that. You've got to pay attention to your job. You can only do one thing at a time. All the way from that to religion saying you cannot serve the deities and the anti-deities. You cannot follow gods and their great teaching and the mundane affairs of man. Such messages are throughout man's history. throughout all the cities, all the states, and I ask you now, what might be up? And not leaving it by any means at the religious level. But why is there such a feeling? Why, what use is being made in life's body coming out in the behavior and the beliefs of man? All right, let me give you a translation, one translation. One of the translations of this, you cannot serve God and man, but you got to make a choice. You have to apply yourself to one or the other. Take this road or that road. One translation, it is saying that you either follow the hungers of the five senses, or, now based upon that translation, the interesting part, well, you'll find the first part a little interesting again. The serving of man, that part that would seem to be from the religious source of this idea, man would be the lesser part, the negative part, but that is limited to, it is wrapped up in the fact of my, now based upon that translation, the interesting part, well, you'll find the first part a little interesting again. The serving of man, that part that would seem to be from the religious source of this idea, man would be the lesser part, the negative part, but that is limited to, it is wrapped up in the fact of my translation, there's no escaping from it, that you're going to either pursue, follow, just the ordinary mechanical hungers of the senses, the five senses. That's following man. That's what they mean by it. Or, now we've got to translate the other part, they say are following God, and I said are following or. Now, what is the possibility? What is the possibility beyond the hungers of the five senses? What are you going to feed beyond that? Now, you people have got to be beyond the point of now believing, well, the other possibility, I'm going to feed my little soul. Don't tell me that until you can find your little soul. What is the alternative? You're either going to feed the hungers of the five senses, that everything you do, whether you or someone else at that particular moment looks at as being a positive or a otherwise act, anything that you can think of to do, anything that you can do is going to be feeding one of the five senses. Am I not correct? And yet, it's built into the genetic structure of mankind that there is an alternative. That you're either going to serve man, to follow those kind of carnal, fleshy hungers. It's either that or this superior thing. What is this superior thing? What is it? If it is not going to be in some way feeding one or more of the five senses, what is this or? In the city, the people have only the five senses available. If there is any or, if there is any alternative, it's going to be out in the bushes. And out in the bushes, remember, if it's going to be of any value, it's got to meet the criteria of it never was, is not now, and will never be. Instead of just men, let me drag back in our old friends, the three forces, the three winds, the three names for the winds, the three whatever the hells they are. That's what the kid said, but sometimes he gets a little flipping of the tongue. Let me drag them in here for a second. This is a corollary to can't serve man and God, you can't serve two masters, and etc. How about this one? Now listen, this is a distinct version of the same thing. There's several of them. One of them is the comment, if you're not for us, you're against us. A variation of that is one that goes, all that's necessary, or it's not necessary that men do evil. All that's necessary is for good men to do nothing. Let me tell you what that is. That is a distinct suspicion of Eve's existence. In that, in those small ways that it continues to pop out of life into some men's minds and mouths throughout history, this kind of thing that, all right, it's not as simple perhaps as just black and white or this or that. And you people over here that apparently are not involved with this struggle, don't give us that. If you're not for us, you're against us. If you're not helping some way with the solutions here, you, my friend, are part of the problem. Acting as a kind of suspicion that E may exist, that which apparently is disinterested may actually play some specific part. It just comes and it goes. And if the ordinary intellect of the people have to analyze this kind of thing about, all right, you're either for us or against us, it turns it back into, as it must, in the city, a binary situation. There are two people over here. You can find these kind of attitudes carried down to a more specific binary approach, the kind of Machiavellian attitude that, all right, if you're going to stage war with a neighboring kingdom, with a neighboring city, adjoining cities, adjoining kingdoms cannot stay impartial. They may say they are, they may try to, but they're not. And you might as well confront them one way or the other. And part of this confrontation is, part of this accusation is, all right, who are you for? Well, it's between you two guys. I'm not for anybody. And this strikes the nervous systems of many cities and principalities as being true. It probably strikes all of you as being quite valid. That the first prince, the first ruling power that asks this neighboring, non-involved entity, who are you for? Me or my opponent? And they said, no, this is your squabble. This is your war, I'm not in it. And he says, that won't wash. That will not do, because if you're not for me, you're against me. It has now turned a disinterested party. It has now turned what I suggest to you as a potential E forcefully, as it's supposed to do, into either a C or a D. But the very comment, that fast, was the opportunity for somebody to glimpse somewhere that what they were doing, in essence, what life was making them kind of just get a flashing glimpse of, was, hey, that which seems to be relevant ain't. They got no name for it. They certainly don't call it E stuff. They'd probably agree that up to a certain point it was irrelevant, but you got to deal with it, because somewhere down the line, this neighboring principality, these other people might cease to be irrelevant or apparently impartial. So we got to line up our ducks or our kingdoms or our neighbors now. So they take that which from one view could be a quick suspicion, a quick glimpse that the apparently irrelevant might be otherwise, and they snatch it. They force it into being relevant. All right, don't tell me that you're not going to answer who you're for. In that case, I'm going to put you down as against me. Just, that settles that. Get ready to be attacked. about some more about boredom and related matters. Me pointing out, as is no great fresh verbal data by now, if one way to approach feelings of boredom, it feels like it's become boredom in the bushes. There's a new level of ennui and stagnation, is to do something new, or to, if you know how to, overdo something old, which is the same thing. But there is a way that you people, many of you have experienced it, and it becomes newly won ground, and you stay there and you forget it. It's like somebody every day getting a piece of mail, and every day they can't believe that the mail runs. It's like somebody every day getting up and seeing the sun and being amazed at this thing, and they get the next day and they go through the same procedure over and over. There are, in the 3D world, there are peripheral effects and benefits of doing something new. And you people, I have never verbally brought it down to such a crude level, but I'm going to, because it's back up and you people want to discuss it. If I insist, whether you were talking about boredom or whether I just picked on you in the past and said, hey, I want you to go out and I want you to go enroll in night school and I want you to take Algebra 101. I want you to make a B. Or if I pick out somebody and say, listen, do you ever swim? Oh, you don't even know how? All right, I want you to go and join the Y. And within 3 months, I want you swimming nonstop a mile a day in the pool. And of course, many of you have been through this with me, if not individually, through you picking up the general feeling that would be good for you. And many, many, many of you have gone through enough that there was some split second that you had no question as to the validity, as to the value of doing something new, and then it's gone. And what is really gone is you recognizing and being able to remember the peripheral effects of doing something new, such as, I'm going to have to get crude, I never wanted to do this. Well, I know there's a lot of things I never wanted to do, but this is one of them. Nope. I hate to keep letting the kid interfere, but I assume you people are used to it by now. For instance, what if I said, all right, you got to go and take up swimming. You got to go learn how to swim, and within 6 months, you got to be swimming a mile a night, or else I just throw you out of this. And so you go do it. And you do not take into consideration as is occurring, and if you do, it becomes newly won ground, and you think you've learned something, and it's gone, and begins to rot on you, and you forget it, and that is such things as this. Let us say that here it has been X number of days, X number of weeks, and you're down there every night, and you're working at the pool, and now the chlorines begin to get you, something new, and now you fall into the habit after X amount of nights. Just around the corner, the chlorine's so bad, and even after you wash it and take a shower and drink a little cold water, you fall in the habit of stopping in this restaurant that you've never even seen. You've never been in that neighborhood until you join the Y, and you begin to stop in there all the time, and you begin to know somebody working behind the counter. You begin to speak to them. There begins to be other people. Other things happen other than, God damn it, you taking up swimming. Anybody that believes that they're going to undertake something new, whether I picked it out or whether you begin to have the revolutionary ability to do something irrelevant, to become almost single-minded in an irrelevant fashion about something at some time at some place, to believe that's all there is, I don't know why I wasted my time on you. I don't know why you waste your time on you, because you're not even superior to yourself. You're common. Fine folks. I don't want anything to do with you. You're too good for me. You're too reasonable. Plus you won't talk too much. Because you people, recruits, will want to discuss doing something new. They'll discuss it forever. All I got to do is stand still for 2 or 3 seconds and not look like that I'm constantly about to walk off from you, that I maybe have something else to do, if I stand still for a second, somebody will come up and talk to me about, and it always has a great preface. It's always about, I have been thinking about taking up nude skydiving. I know the rest. The rest is, let's discuss it. There is only a matter of this. Back to some of the small wonders, some of the small benefits of the three-dimensional world, that you apparently only have 2 choices. And some of these, what's really neat, is they hold over into the bushes, because I make them hold over. And that is, there's only one question. Oh, all right, 2 questions. About doing something new, a particular something. There's only 2 questions. Will I do it, or will I not do it? That is it. But the people, based upon the need for orderly, progressive, controlled change, at the very least, at the very most, the small mumblings, admissions, the musings of, well, perhaps reform. Reform, reform, reform. Amidst that, the people will try and qualify this. You will try and discuss forever not the 2 questions of will I do it or will I not do it. You want to discuss such things as the degree to which I should throw myself into this. That is, the degree to which I should do it. The question of whether I will do it correctly. The question of whether I will do it as well as somebody else could do it. There are only 2 questions. Will I do it or will I not do it? That's it. It's only people who are not going to do it that will entertain these questions of degree and try and qualify it and talk it into oblivion. Anybody who believes that any question you have to me, to yourself, that there is some reasonable cause and purpose of being cautious, thinking through something new to do, you're wasting my time. You're wasting your time. And I don't care that if we could judge how we have expanded your own nervous system, to what degree we may have freed you from the hold of your own genes since you've been involved with this. That's yesterday's news. The real revolutionist would have one question for himself each day, to his own people and to himself. And that would be kind of like this, would be to himself now, yeah, well, what have I done for me lately? And lately is always right after the why in lately, and it's gone. You cannot use change immediately. You cannot apparently produce this energy that comes upon you at times that you can't really describe, that you consider to be slightly miraculous, unless you can absorb one of those 2 and use it. That is, that you have got to face the fact that there's only 2 questions. If it's change you thought of, if suddenly, because I mentioned it, that you did think, skydive, skydive, and your whole little system goes, ooh. And the battle immediately is on is, I couldn't do that, I would die. They would have to take a blowtorch to get my hands off the props there to really get me out the door. Or they may throw me and kick my legs out, but I'll hold on when I get there. The battle's already going on. There's got to only be one question. I'm either going to do it, I'm not going to do it. You've either got to know that, or you have got to have a more of a time memory, an awareness that whatever it is, if you've got something that seems to be less drastic than that, is not to be captured in a mechanically single-minded way by such questions as, all right, I will go take up swimming. Well, what the hell's that got to do with this? And you don't understand. You've forgotten things that you've done already. Anything you get from revolutionary activity is not easily identifiable. It is not predictable. If it were, it'd fall into the criteria of being useless. The real benefit of doing something, of going and taking a class, that I can just look at you in my mystical way and know that next to roaches you probably hate numbers. And I say, you have got to go take at least Algebra 101, and you got to make at least a B. You got to come in the top 20% of the class. I don't care how old they are. That's not the point. That could be one of the points. Well, now that I said it, it's not, but it could have been. It is going to do something else. It's got other potential, or it's useless. It's got other potential that as far as the people, as far as the people's initial attitude, it's only got one purpose. There only seems to be one thing. You said, I got to do it. The purpose seems to be to learn about math. Anything else would be what? Well, what am I thinking? What's the word? Irrelevant. Yeah, that's it. That's including 20?
That's to the end of the tape. So it's 10 until 20.
So I got 15. Huh. We figured that out. Let me jump to some more things I keep trying to get to that apparently are city matters. Kind of matters in which everyone seems to have an interest. How about love in the ordinary sense? That ordinary cityfied consciousness cannot deal with, would take it as being an attack, and it sure is not an attack. Well, let me point out something to you, what is called love between people. When you say that you love somebody, you are quite simply doing this. You are indicating, you're admitting to them a chemical pleasure that the other person seems to ignite in you. That in one or more of your senses, physical senses, every day walking around, smell, touch, and etc., you are saying that that person pleasurably ignites a chemical change in you. And the old things that poets want to say about, well, I love somebody better than I do myself. That seems to be, back in the city, that would seem to be the height of sensual love. That I actually love you better than I love myself. Jesus Christ, those people, everybody's failed math. They can't add 2 and 2. They couldn't map the topography of their own palm. You cannot love somebody better than you love yourself. What you do is you like the chemical processes they stir up in you better than any of the ones that just seem to come upon you naturally, such as waking up in the morning, or sticking your finger in your ear, or getting a crick out of your back. Now, we can talk about love, and such things, of course, as you all know, have their place in the city, just as important as history and other things in the city. But when you talk about that you love somebody, you are saying one thing, you're admitting one thing, everybody, is that you affect chemical changes in me that I find pleasurable. But the changes are in me. There is no love floating out here. This is not something that I was lacking and you brought it in and you went, hey, here's some love. Or I've got love and you can have some. There you are with a prevailing chemical pattern going on. The lab is operating in a certain mode, in a certain manner. And now you come in contact with another organism and there is a transfer of energy, and the transfer creates what seems to you, which we're not questioning, to be pleasurable changes down in the lab. That is love. There should only be, if it was understood out in the bushes, only one true love song to do it from a man's verbal point as opposed to a woman. It would be something on the basis of, Mama, I am overjoyed at the molecular rearrangements you cause in me. That's the title of the song. That's the first, second, third, and fourth verse. And that's the chorus. But since I'm in love, the area that is, let me present a dirty one that maybe I'll drag back in a notebook, or maybe I'll let Kyroots, or maybe I'll come back to it. But let me ask you this. Everybody knows what first love is. You know what people believe they mean, including yourself, just instantly. So it seems. Love at first sight, first meeting, just almost instantaneous. Taking that, still not distracting from that, but taking into account what I have just described. Let me ask you this. Is there any love of any nature if it is not immediate love at first sight? Now, you can wander off tonight and think about this until at such time if I ever come back. You think about it on a very mundane physical level in your own life. Has there ever been a relationship with anybody that would really qualify, without us arguing words, that in your ordinary life that you're really in love with, that you did not feel that pleasure the first time you laid eyes on them? Now, I assume most of you people, being as woolly as you are, that you've probably been to bed here and there with people that was a one-night stand, or maybe a 10-night stand. But you do not even now, after the fact, look at it as being a love relationship. But those that were there any exception to the fact that it seemed to be love immediately at first sight? Now could I suggest to you that you jump way beyond the area, off at some right angle from apparently discussions of sensual love, and think about, all sorts of things. Interest in, the alleged revolutionary activity, interest in yourself? I don't know. Is there anything that could be called love if it is not instant and is not at first sight? That couldn't have any relationship whatsoever to this, could it? That couldn't have any relationship to the fact that you can't be converted to this, you can't be talked into revolutionary interest. Well, plus it also put in, if not a monkey wrench, perhaps a rhino screwdriver into the idea that there is anything postnatally. Maybe Stevie Wonder, that great philosopher, was correct with, I was born to love her. If you weren't born to love her, well, that was just a rock and roll song. There's one thing for sure, life is a lot more than rock and roll. You can write that down, kid. Let me say one more thing to recruits, all of you people, whether I have known you for some time, whether I have not even met you, you people getting this at other times and other places by tape, it's still true that it is really a dastardly occurrence for me to ever have to be ashamed for you and ashamed of being connected with you And it happens, it verges on happening, it happens at times that I do not allow it to actually become true, that I stop it. But if you knew how to be ashamed, you should be ashamed for ever having me ashamed of you ever letting your lower parts, the older parts, the people of your own city, your minor league me's, to ever have them lead you around, to ever have them mislead you, to have any of you have your prick, as it were, leading you instead of your commitment, or put it at the most crude level, to have your prick, in a man's case, leading you instead of your brain, just at the simplest level. Or to let, if we want to look at it from less of a masculine gender view, letting your need for affection, letting anything, it could be letting hunger, a desire for a drink, a desire to take a damn nap when you're in here. Now, if you want to take a nap, you shouldn't come here. The next time I want to take a nap and I'm sleeping on the nights we meet, then as I very often do, I won't be here, right? You don't know what a thrill it is to have to be ashamed of you people that I have invested time and our energy in. And those of you that have actually gained some ground somewhere, that you're not actually the same that you were when I met you, that there was some validity to any claim on your part and any acceptance on my part that you were going to do this, and in a split second, without being melodramatic, without having to drag in stories of the gates of heaven open and close on you, is you let your older parts, the lower parts, and all of you know by now, I assume that you can feel, even you people in other times and other places, I have nothing whatsoever against sex. I hate to admit it, sometimes I got nothing against a good cold beer, food, definitely nothing against sleeping, laying down, nothing against the senses. We in no way torture ourselves, and I do not have a hair shirt left in my wardrobe. And yet the senses themselves, those of you that have made some progress, can turn right around and let anger, let sex, let greed, let tiredness of the whole organism have people thrown right out of the bushes. And as I said, there's been times that I have not turned around and thrown everybody out that I could justify doing so. But if you knew what it was to be ashamed of you people, if you knew what it was to be ashamed in a real sense for you and you don't even fucking know it, it is a real shame. And there is no possible excuse, there is no possible justification that you may have been born to do this. You may have a hunger that was strong enough that up to a certain point you would have followed me from here to Hobart, to New Zealand, to Alaska, and claim that this means your whole life, and in a split second you can let good old everyday in the city hormones, the regular old chemical reactions going on inside of everyone's laboratory, just like that, lead you somewhere else. And nobody gives any particular notice to this anymore, especially the longer that you're around, the more that you feel like that you and I have stood and talked personally. It's almost as though you feel that you're immune, that you've gone past that it's proven to you, and surely to me, that by God you belong in this. Nothing will turn you around. If I wanted you to, you'd defend my good name and my honor. You would wear my name on your chest. You'd wear a t-shirt. All those fine things. And you will still let the older circuits, you will let the mundane drives and hungers of city people, which are all right, you will let them take precedence over this. This is not intended, of course, as any kind of simplistic attack on you, But it's the kind of information that nobody still considers to be of any particular value, or else you consider, well, hey, listen, I know all that. Why don't you become a reviewer on the college paper? Yeah, I know all that. No, you don't. If there was any justification, if there was any way I was really trying to rub your face into it, just ask yourself this. Not out loud. Don't let me know it. And I'm stepping outside the limits, my general limits of the recruits camp. But let me ask you this. How would you feel if I did any of that to you in your presence? Can you conceive of it? Not that I might not want to. Not that I might not be capable of it. What would that do to you? And it'd be a lot worse than that arrangement. It wouldn't be that you would simply be disappointed. It would probably kill you for this. Not just with me, but period. But nobody gives it much of a thought other than I have these rules that you cannot be or display hostility between each other, and there can't be casual flirting, any kind of just casual sex going on for the benefit of the group. Not because there's anything wrong with that, with sex. But by and large, you take it as simply being conditions, demands. By and large, fairly reasonable, except now and then, for little split seconds. If you think a split second won't kill you, you got to remember, if you could, it's been the split seconds that fast that have kept you going this far. Those blinding moments, and then they're gone. You can't use them again, no matter how you try. We're going off in another direction. It's those same kind of blinding moments that can be the end of you. The absolute end of it. Which is all right, then you can go back to the city and phew. Think of the many of years that you got to catch up on drinking and dope. We've got we do have 20 minutes, right? Is that true? Well, I'm going to stop and